Welcome back to the Bitter to Better podcast. Today's episode is about making the most of your child-free time. But before we get into that, I just want to do a couple of announcements. This is the last day that you can register for my free webinar that I'm hosting tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a webinar for dating moms, moms who haven't started dating but want to or are even considering it, moms who have been dating and struggling, moms who have been dating and it's going well. This is a podcast. Nope, I mean a webinar. This is a webinar for dating moms. So if you go to the show notes of this episode, you can get the link to register and pass the link on to any single moms who you know may be interested in joining us. Also, the Date Better group coaching program launches in January, and so I'll be giving a lot of information about that program at this webinar. So definitely join the webinar, but also there's a link for the Date Better program so you can get a little bit of information on that in advance. And as always, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Coach Tracy, and you can also listen to this podcast on all podcast platforms. And you can follow me on the socials, mainly Instagram. I'm trying to up my TikTok involvement, but I make no promises. So, on that note, let's get into the episode. So, making the most of your child-free time was inspired by a past episode about dating as the default parent. Because in that episode, I talk about making time for dating, and it made me think about how we can make the most of our child-free time for various reasons. So, not just dating. So, that's what inspired this episode because when being the default parent or being a single parent, you're carrying a lot. And therefore, it's really important to have breaks when and how you can. And obviously, everyone's circumstances are different, but I am a proponent for identifying how you want something to be and then taking steps, taking what steps are within your control to make it become what you want it to be or to increase the chances of it becoming what you want to be. So in this case, I'm referring to identifying like what type of breaks that you would like to have in your life, like where you would like to have these breaks, for how long, and what you'd like to be doing with these breaks in terms of being child free. And this episode is coming out on December 15th, so that's the week before Christmas break. And so I thought it would be a good time to kind of talk about this because maybe you can plan some time for yourself and make the most of any child-free time that you might happen to be able to have, right? The kids are going to be out of school for some portion of the holidays. And if you are someone who has a co-parent who is around and available, then maybe you're making plans for your child to be with their other parent at some point. So I just want to talk about how we go about doing that and whether it's for the holidays or any other time of the year. And the idea is that it helps to lighten the burden of parenting so that you can show up as you need to for yourself, for your kids, for work, for people in your life, and just getting things done that you need to get done, right? So with that, I thought I would kind of share my method for trying to do this with acknowledging the fact, with acknowledging certain things about my circumstances. So, my two biological sons are from two different fathers. So, I have two different co-parenting relationships happening. And I try to have as positive and communicative relationships with my co-parents as possible for you know, for our children's sake and for my sake. So I think about the fact of how I am very intentional about uh, planning the time as much as possible for having those child-free breaks. And that allows me to be able to engage in a number of things, anything from, vacations to time to focus on work, more like uninterrupted time to focus on work, time to clean and organize my home, time to run errands, time to just relax, any of these sort of things. Um, so I want to just kind of share some things to maybe consider when it comes to trying to make this time for yourself. The first thing that it's somewhat like it requires is boundaries with your ex. And there's a past episode about setting boundaries with your ex. That is such an important thing. And so many people do not have very good or healthy boundaries with their ex because they may have a controlling ex. I think there's a video about that on my YouTube channel from back in the day. But they may, so how to deal with a controlling ex. They may have a controlling ex, an ex who's always overstepping bounds, who is um, asking, being all in their business, asking questions about what they're doing and who they're doing it with, as if that person is still owed those answers. But, even though you guys are not together, um, using the child as a pawn. Well, my son or my daughter is with you, so X, Y, and Z. No, no, no. As long as the children are safe and well, all this is about having clear, distinct, and appropriate boundaries with your ex/co-parent. At this point in your relationship, if you are not together with them, right, then you are co-parents. You are not in a romantic relationship with this person, so you do not owe them information about where you are and what you're doing. Now, if you guys happen to have a healthy, positive, communicative relationship like that, and that's information you want to share, great. When everyone's being respectful and boundaries are being kept, that's an ideal situation. You can just interact like two normal human beings. But the reality is that information is not owed. What is owed is information that impacts your child, right? And so, to be clear, who you are dating or in a relationship with very well may impact your child, right? In terms of them being around that person being around your child. But the idea here is that while you are going about your life meeting people and getting to know them and deciding if they are someone who you want to bring into your life in that way, your ex doesn't have to or need to know all of that. They just need to know that your child is safe and well. Same on the other end when it comes to what they're doing in term from your perspective. So what I'm saying here is I do a lot of work a lot of times with women around establishing healthy boundaries with their ex. Here's the information that is owed. Here's the information that is not owed. Here are the boundaries you want to set around communication with this person. You know, requesting from them that they communicate with you about certain key things. Okay, like, when they plan to see your child, what time they're planning to pick up and drop off. And this all being so that you can arrange your life and schedule accordingly. You want to be available when they drop, your child off, or you want to know how much time you have to go out and run this errand or to go take this trip or things like that, right? And so the idea is with boundary setting, we, you know, it is about what's within your control, meaning you cannot control another person's behavior, but you can control your response to that behavior. You can control what access you give them to information about you. You can control this idea of like you might ask somebody to please communicate with you about something, and maybe they don't. But the idea being that like, I just spoke to someone who gave the example of, their ex was supposed to pick up their child on one day, um, but then the day came and they heard nothing from them. They didn't communicate. The person didn't pick the child up, nothing. But then the next day they reached out and said, "Hey, I want to see the kid." But this mom had already made plans for her and her kids for that day. So it didn't work. And she explained that. And then, the co-parent, the ex got mad and all this sort of thing. But that wasn't within their right to do that, to get mad about that, because the reality is we had a plan. You not only didn't follow through on the plan, but you did not communicate about your decision to or inability to follow through on coming to pick up the child. So in that case, a boundary is being set in which that person, that mom, did not just contort herself to meet the expectation of this dad who had no respect for her time, no consideration for her time, or even consideration for the kids, the fact that they were going to be spending time with family on that day. And so she moved along with what she had planned. And I'm not saying there's never a time to accommodate the other person, but that requires both people being considerate and respectful for each other's time, energy, schedules, stuff like that. So, what I'm saying here is that's one example of setting a boundary. Hey, if you're not going to communicate with me around pick up and drop off with our kid, just know that I have a life with them as well. I'm going to make plans in that life, and you'll just have to get in where you fit in when you just want to pop up and request or demand time, as opposed to you sticking to the plan we had, or at the very least communicating with me about the change in plans so that I know what to do, right? That could have been something where that person called and said, "Hey, I know I said I picked them up today. I'm not able to do it. Maybe they'll be available tomorrow." And then she could have planned for that if it worked for her life, right? But my point here is boundary setting and the idea too that what you want to be thoughtful and careful about the patterns that you may unintentionally set up from the beginning. If she had just contorted and said, "Oh, okay, well, fine, you can go ahead and take her," that might have set up a pattern for him to feel like he could just uh pop in whenever he wanted and not communicate appropriately, right? So you obviously take these things on a case by case basis, but what I'm getting at is you do want to be thoughtful of about the patterns that you may be setting up even unintentionally, right? So what I'm saying though is the best way to set yourself up for success in making the most of your child-free time is there being some sort of healthy boundaries established between you and your ex around communicating about childcare and child pickup and drop off and time with the kid and stuff like that, right? So that you can ideally be able to reach out to them and say, "Hey, I am looking to take time on this day or for this amount of time." You may decide to say what for, you may not, because again, they're not owed that information. But if you have a cordial enough relationship, then you might be able to say, like, yeah, because I want to take a vacation or I just want a day to rest or relax, whatever, right? You want to be able to say to that person, "Hey, here's the time that I'm looking at. Does this work for you? Does this work for your schedule? Can we talk about this? You know, let me know what you think about this suggestion, right?" So, for examples in my life, I think about what the work schedule of my co-parents are. I think about what their life circumstances are, in regards to their ability to their transportation, their ability to be able to pick up my children or for me to drop them off, all these sort of things, right? And then I move accordingly based on the things that I'm looking to do in my life. Am I looking to take a vacation? Am I looking to have, again, time to rest or run errands or things like that? And so I usually will reach out and say, "Hey, are you available?" And actually, let me back up because with both of my co-parents, there are two different circumstances. So with one, they have a pretty set work schedule. With the other, they have more of a rotating type of work schedule. And with one, they live out of the state, and with the other, they live in the state within about 20 minutes of me, right? So all of these things are factors. Um, and so, um, with, my older son, I will usually reach out to his dad and say, "Hey, are you available to have him these days, whatever the days are that I'm looking for?" And he gets back to me and lets me know what days work, what days don't work, and we plan, okay, great. Am I picking them? Are you going to pick them up? Am I going to drop them off? That sort of thing. And we arrange that. With my younger son, because his dad lives out of state, it's not as easy to, and he has a set work schedule. I'm pretty solid on the days that I know that would work for him. My younger son goes with his dad every weekend, so that's an automatic built-in break in parenting for that child, right? But and I know that, he has like Mondays off. And so if it's, sometimes I'll make it like a long weekend if there's something that I know I need to or want to do, on a Monday or something like that. And so I would reach out and say, "Hey, on this weekend coming up, are you available to, not, have him picked up until Monday rather than Sunday, stuff like that." Then that's how I would generally do things. But what happened this year is I also realized that I would like and need a break during the summer when the kids are out of school. And we had previously not, and mind you, I'm talking about my now first grader. So like we're new into like formalized school with him. But we had previously, like the year before, not made any plans for him to stay any extended period of time with his dad over the summer. Because he goes there every weekend, that's like naturally built in that every week he's with his dad. But during the summer, of course, the kids are out for weeks at a time. So I realized that for this year, or this coming summer, the summer that's coming up, that I really wanted to really just make time to have a week or two of uh, not parenting that child and him having more time with his dad. So I reached out at the beginning of the school year and said, "Hey, obviously I understand you have work. Um, but I do want to see if we can be proactive and plan in advance about you having our son for a week or two during the summer. So I brought that up at the beginning of the school year, knowing that he has to make arrangements around work, childcare, things like that. But what that did was it opened up the conversation for us. He was like, yes, let's look into that." So he's prepared for the idea as he's going through this year. He's prepared for the need to block out a week or two during the summer in terms of his PTO, childcare, plans that he wants to make, any of that. But he has many months to get that planned out and figured out. Right. And what I also did was I took the school calendar for the year and I looked at every day that the kids don't have school for one reason or another, a teacher work day, a holiday, whatever. And any of those that fell on Mondays because my co-parent has that day off, I reached out and was like, "Hey, would you be able to, keep him on these long weekends because these are the ones that happen to fall on a Monday and you don't have work on a Monday. And there are plenty of others that don't fall on a Monday. So I would still have him on those days. But we set these up in advance so that I can also now plan accordingly in my life around knowing that his dad's going to have him, these days. And what I like to do is I like to follow up as it's getting closer to those days, say, "Hey, just confirming that we're still on for X, Y, and Z." All right. So this is how I have done this very recently. I have looked at the school calendar and said, "Hey, these things are going to be coming up. Can we work out a plan?" That at least gives the option of being able to plan that time for yourself. And obviously, I'm talking about my circumstances in which I have generally positive co-parenting relationships, and how those have looked over the years have shifted up and down, sometimes been better than others. So I recognize though that like that's something I'm able to do because I happen to have uh two co-parents who are reasonable and we generally get along and make it work, right? I realize everyone doesn't have that. And that goes back to starting some of the stuff when it comes to the boundaries and stuff like that. But for people who do have that, what I am suggesting is that you really plan these things out in advance and say, "Hey, here are the days I'm looking at. How does that work for you?" Now, that's the planning part. The other part of it is just looking at you. Let's say, so you get the time, so you get the child free time. Let's say you have some days coming up during the holidays where you know your child's not going to be with you. And this could be whether they're not with you because they're with their other parent or because they're with someone else. But the point is that you have that child free time. Then you want to ask yourself, what do I want to do with that time? So again, I'm a big proponent of planning out your like free time. And that may sound like counterintuitive because it's free time, but the reality of the situation is if you are a single mom, then that free time is limited and valuable and precious. So, what I suggest is that you have a general sense of what you want to be doing with that time. Let's say you know you have 3 days coming up where you're going to not have your kids, or you're not going to have, the youngest children who take more hands-on effort, right? But maybe you have older kids where there's more independence. You want to ask yourself, what do I want to be doing with this time? Do I need some time to relax? How am I going to choose to do that? Am I binge watching some television? Am I going to get my nails done? Am I going out with friends? Whatever. Am I taking a walk? Am I taking a little trip? Is it going to be a solo trip? Is it going to be with other people? Am I taking a bit of a staycation or a very nearbycation? One of my favorite things, and I've talked about it before in a past episode, I think about solo trips, is getting an Airbnb in a town near you, not far from you, or somewhere in your state and going and staying a night or two, things like that. Getting out of so that you get out of your house so that you're not distracted by all the things you maybe need to do in your house and you can still like feel like you've gotten away and gotten some relaxation. But also, is it that you need to, get a bunch of errands done and not be, bringing a child with you everywhere to do that? Maybe you want to clean your home and organize. Maybe you want to zone in on getting certain work done. Maybe there's certain hobbies you're working on. But like that was always one of my favorite things to do, and I did often when I had child-free time was, I'm talking about particularly in the past when I was single, because then I really like had to value that time. I would think about, okay, what do I want this time to look like? And that's when I would make time for dates. That's when I would make time for just binge watching TV without having kids in the background or without having to be really careful about what show I'm watching because the kids might be around and it might not be appropriate, right? That's when I was really thoughtful of, oh, is there a restaurant that I want to try? Let me go out and just do that in the middle of the day because I can. Um, and that is also when a lot of my time was spent on building this coaching business and, doing my recordings. Because again, I didn't have kids making noise in the background and stuff like that. And these were some of the best things that I did for myself was planning that intentional time. Did I want to just go out to a movie by myself, hop in the car, free as a bird? Yes, yes. And that is how I got in a lot of my self-care was that when I did have the child-free time, which I oftentimes very intentionally planned out, but when I did have the child-free time, I made the most of it by getting a general idea of what I wanted to accomplish or how I wanted to spend that time during how I want to spend my time during that child-free time. So these are just some things to think about with the holidays coming up and for you to think about over the next year, going into the summer. Who can you reach out to say, hey, I'd like to plan some breaks for myself? And do these days work for you? So this is, ideally something you can do with a co-parent, but it also may be something you do with the people who you have in your life who do help to care for your kids, whether it's your parents or a friend or a family member. But it's about being intentional and thoughtful about what you want to make of that time, and particularly looking at the times where there's some extended period of time that you may be able to have. So Christmas break, winter break, spring break, summer break. Being able to reach out to the appropriate people well in advance and say, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. And I want to be clear. I know that asking way in advance oftentimes might get you the response for, well, I don't know, that's too early. That's fine because you're like, okay, I'll check in a couple months and then I'll check in from there and I'll check in from there. But putting it making it very intentional for you to check in with, again, your child's other parent who is just as obligated as you are to care for your child, to reach out and say, hey, just checking in. Does this time work? Does this time work? Does this time work? And then starting to just get into that habit of being a routine between the two of you that you do every year so that you can make sure you get that intentional time. So this was just a little bit about making the most of your child free time.